When I was 13, I lived next door to this super cool and beautiful girl named Stephanie. And Stephanie was very popular and always hanging out with her friends at her house. And whenever I was bored at my house, my mom would be like, why don't you go over to Stephanie's? And I'd be like, Mom! Stephanie would never want to hang out with me. But then one day, Stephanie knocked on my door and was like, hey Lydia, I'm having a bonfire in my backyard tonight if you want to come by. So that night I went over to Stephanie's backyard. So I was chilling, sitting by the campfire, playing it cool. But then one of Stephanie's friends, Shelby, was like, my butt hurts from sitting in the grass. David, I'm gonna come sit in your lap. And then all of the girls decided that they were gonna sit in the boys' laps. And there was one boy left, Tyler, and it felt like everyone was expecting me to go sit in Tyler's lap. So I go sit down in Tyler's lap, and it's all very exciting because I've never sat in a boy's lap before. And then someone says something funny, and I start laughing. But the pressure of my laughter causes a long, loud fart to escape from my 13-year-old butthole. And everyone goes silent. And then Stephanie goes, did someone just fart? And Tyler goes, I think it was Lydia. And I go, no it wasn't, but I think I'm gonna go home now. And now it's been 12 years since I farted in Tyler's lap, and I still think about it at least once a week. When adults tell you that certain things won't be embarrassing when you get older, they're lying.
Should I tell my mom that my stepdad has been hitting on me, aka her husband? Disclaimer, it's not my story time, send me on Instagram. When he put his hand on my lap, I pushed him away and told him he was being disgusting. That's when he grabbed my hand and told me that there was nothing wrong with him appreciating my beauty. And remember, we're at my mom's birthday party. I went over to my mom with the intention to tell her, but she was having so much fun and it was her birthday, I didn't want to spoil it. For the rest of the night, I had to avoid him. He would follow me everywhere and try to grab my hand. I finally went up to my bedroom and locked myself in there. A few days after the party, he came up to me and said, I need to apologize to you. And I said, what for? That's when he said, you know why. Then he told me he made reservations at a really nice restaurant for us to go to. And of course, I said no. That's when he told me that we were both adults, and that we could hang out together when my mom wasn't around. I said no, and I've been avoiding him since then. But I think avoiding him is doing the opposite. He now started sending me gym selfies. I told him he needed to stop, and he said he just wanted to send me his progress so that I could be proud of him. Ew. Never. I decided that I should move out and I started looking for my own apartment. I thought maybe I should wait until I move out to tell my mom, or maybe not tell her at all. No, this is gonna break her heart and flip her world upside down. He has a really comfy life with him, but I don't think that's worth losing me, right? How should I tell my mom? My biggest fear is that she doesn't believe me. What should I do?
This is why you should always check your back seat. A woman coming home from work decided to drive home. As she's driving, she notices a black car following behind her. In every red light she stops at, this black car will constantly flicker his lights. She began to panic and drove faster and faster, taking every turn she could to get away from this car. As she's driving, she calls her dad and tells her that this car is following her and to meet her in the driveway so she's not alone. She pulled into the driveway and sees her dad waiting outside. Then she sees the car that's been following her pull in right behind her. The man in the black car behind her gets out of his vehicle and runs to her and says, get out of your car now. She gets out and the man behind her says, there is somebody trying to kill you. The man in the black car behind her pulls out a weapon. He shows the woman that there has been a man in her back seat, and every time he would flash his lights, it was because the man was about to stab her.
6th grade, I went to go visit my little cousins at their house. Their house was right on the edge of these woods. And the woods were really thick, and our parents always told us not to go there. And one time I asked my mom why, and she said because when people do bad things, they sometimes go and hide in the woods. I was staying at my cousin's house for a week on this one trip, and whenever I was bored, I would go look out the window and watch the woods. Usually it was pretty boring, and I would just be staring at trees. But one day it was like 5 p.m. and the sun was setting, so it was getting dark, and I saw something moving in the woods. I told my uncle, and he said it was probably just an animal. And I told him no, it was tall and looked like a skinny lady. And he said I have a creative imagination and it was probably just a deer. But then a few minutes later, I heard my aunt and uncle whispering in the kitchen. My aunt was talking about a woman from the psychiatric hospital in their town who had escaped. Their house was like 15 minutes away from a maximum security psychiatric hospital for criminals with mental illness. And then they saw me listening to them in the doorway and they stopped talking completely. A few days later, in the middle of the night, I heard a noise downstairs. So I woke up in the middle of the night from this noise coming from downstairs. It sounded like something was scratching the back door. But when I got downstairs, the noise had stopped. But when I looked at the window facing the woods, there were footprints in the snow. But my aunt and uncle were really strict, and they had this rule that we weren't allowed to go in their room when they were sleeping. So I made sure all the doors were locked, and I decided I would tell them in the morning. The next morning we woke up and it was a really intense blizzard. Such heavy snowfall that we couldn't see the ground. So when I told my aunt and uncle about the footprints, they didn't believe me and told me it was probably a nightmare. The next day I had to leave, and I didn't go back and visit my cousins for a long time. But the next summer, my cousins really wanted me to come for their birthday party. Before visiting them, I looked up whether they had ever found the woman who had escaped from the hospital. And Google said that authorities were still looking for her and it was a high priority case. When I got to their house, I was playing with my cousins. They were about to turn 6 years old, and one of them goes, let's go check if she's there. And my cousin runs to the window facing the woods. So I asked my other cousin who she was talking about, and she goes, oh, don't worry, that's just her imaginary friend. But I knew that did not sound right.
Story time about how I did the dirty with my sister's boyfriend. Whoops. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My sister and I didn't actually grow up together. I grew up with my dad and she mostly grew up with my mom. Growing up, we were really competitive, like in every single way. But for the most part, we had each other's backs. She's a year older than me, so we weren't in the same grade. I got bullied a lot in high school and she always defended me. Finally, when we graduated from high school, our relationship got a lot better. We stopped competing in everything and our parents actually got back together. This was the happiest moment of our lives. We were all living under the same roof and my parents had started a new business. My sister and I started helping them with their business and it grew a lot. We were financially stable and we were even able to buy a beach house. Every single weekend we would go as a family and with friends. Now when it came to boys, we had the same taste. This unfortunately led us to have a lot of fights. She would meet a guy and I would like him. Or I would meet a guy and she would like him. But we never actively tried to steal each other's boyfriends. Also, our parents were really strict, so my sister and I had to go behind their back to have boyfriends. When I turned 19, I met this really sweet guy. We fell in love. I thought we were gonna get married. My parents were totally against me having a boyfriend, but I told them that I was old enough to make my own decisions. The only person who actually really supported me was my sister. She was able to convince my parents to accept him. So they did. He would come over and have dinner with us. We would go out on dates and eventually he asked my parents for my hand in marriage. But my parents said no. They said I was too young. So he ended up breaking up with me, which was really bad. Then my sister met a guy. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I did the dirty with my sister's boyfriend and should I tell her? Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. So after my boyfriend broke up with me, I was really heartbroken. This was around the time that my sister met her boyfriend, the one that I did it with. They started dating really casually and he made it clear to her that he did not want to be in a relationship with her. And my parents did not like that at all. So basically he was not allowed to come to our house whatsoever. And the thing is, I never even saw his face. My sister showed me his Instagram, but he didn't really have a lot of pictures of himself. I didn't even know what his face looked like. After a few weeks, I told my parents that I wanted to start dating people, and they were so against this. Like I said, my parents are really strict. So here's what I did. I signed up to a bunch of dating apps, and I just started going on dates behind their back. And I know that I'm 19, but I still respected everything my parents told me because I lived under the roof. So I started going on a bunch of dates. And can you guess who I ended up matching with? Yep, my sister's boyfriend. Although I didn't know it was her boyfriend at the time. He and I ended up going on 2 dates. It was amazing, it was wonderful, it was great. He was super charming and really funny. And I did ask him if he was seeing other people, and he said no. But of course, that was a total lie. I even talked to my sister about this guy. I mean, how sick is that? So here's what ended up happening. He and I go back to his place and we do it. The next day, he totally ghosts me. And this is when I started investigating. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I did the dirty with my sister's boyfriend and should I tell her? Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. After he ghosted me, I started doing some investigating. This is when I found his real Instagram. And guess who I see on it? My sister is tagged in his pictures as his girlfriend. I was totally heartbroken. Honestly, I really fell for this guy. He seemed like a really good guy, but of course they all do, right? And talk about how good of a liar he was. On our dates, all he kept talking about was how he wanted to be with somebody and how he really wanted to settle down and live with someone. It's like he was saying exactly what he knew I wanted to hear. So here's what I did. I reported him on the dating app, and then I sent him a DM on his real Instagram, and I sent him a picture of me and my sister, aka his girlfriend. He messaged me right away. He said that he had just started dating my sister and that he didn't know we were related. That's when I told him I knew he was lying. They had been dating for a while now. This guy really thought I was that stupid to believe him that he had just started dating my sister. And of course, he blocked me like the coward he is. Honestly, I don't know how to tell my sister because I feel like she might think it was my fault. Also, if my parents find out, they will kill me. I asked my sister what was up with her boyfriend. That's when she told me that he hadn't been texting her for like 2 days. It's been a week now and he's been ghosting her every single day. I know I should tell my sister, but how do I even start? Also, I know she's gonna tell my parents. I'm terrified. What the heck am I gonna do now?
Story time about when I woke up to a hooded figure standing over me. Due to a multitude of factors, including a recent death of a close friend, I was unbearably depressed at this time in my life. For that reason, my family flew across the country to visit me in LA, where I live. We thought it would be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was off-season. It was late November, the weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty besides locals and a few straggling tourists such as ourselves. Our first priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island, so we immediately checked into our motel, though that word hardly does this place justice. I call it a motel because all the doors to the rooms exited to the outside, but in actuality, our room was one of 20 to 30 quaint guest house-looking buildings arranged in a sort of horseshoe shape around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked dead straight, you'd reach the room that we were given, essentially on the corner before you have to go right to go further into the horseshoe. So from our room, one path led back to the street, the other further into the secluded maze of rooms. After a day of exploring, and having just finished dinner, it was time for a cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and let me just say, it gets dark. Similarly dark was my headspace after the dinner conversation took a left turn and my overwhelming depression got the best of me. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them I just needed to go to sleep. And I did immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I was already losing consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up to my mom saying my name, a harsh whisper. The room had 2 beds, my parents' bed closer to the door and mine further in the room. My mom's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I didn't blame her, considering my mental state at the time. Groggy, I rolled over. What? I asked. As my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming in through the curtains, I saw her turn to face me. She was surprised to see me in my bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who was she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking and see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. In that moment, we were both frozen with fear. When I woke up to a hooded figure standing over me. We were on an island in the middle of the ocean and woke up to see a hooded stranger looming over us. This moment seemed to last forever. Life isn't like the movies, where the characters unleash a blood-curdling scream. Sometimes the only thing that comes out is panicked and guttural. My mom's words became low and severe as she said my dad's name in a dire voice I've never heard her use before. Then the hooded figure did something so bizarre and unsettling. It didn't advance towards us, but instead crouched in the corner near where it stood. The way it crouched was so absolutely unexpected, even in regards to this already unexpected situation, that it terrified me. It seemed animalistic. I knew two things. The hooded figure had been standing over us sleeping, and it's not acting in any sort of way that I can understand. As opposed to the infinite moment of this figure standing over us mere seconds ago, the series of events that unfolded when my hulking ex-military dad woke up happened in an instant. Suddenly, we were at the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mom was screaming, "Get him! Get him!" My dad was running down one path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shouting through sheer adrenaline, "I'm going to fucking kill you!" I ran down the other path towards the street. When I got there, not a sign of the intruder, but it became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad quietly walking back, his head low. He gets really close to me and I hear him say, "It's a fucking kid." So basically, some young teen, tall and lanky as I am in my 20s, wearing all black including a black hoodie, went into the wrong room. Our room. The one time my parents just so happened to forget to lock the door. My mom woke up when he entered and seeing a tall person in a black hoodie thought it was me, assumedly leaving the room in a depressive episode. And when the hooded figure crouched, that was him realizing his mistake and panicking. He was scared of us. As I got back to the room, my mom walked out and hugs the kid, who was now crying his eyes out. I would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me with murder in his eyes.